Captain June stepped off his ship onto the crystal surface of the Vela homeworld, his boots making soft clicking sounds against what looked like polished glass. The air felt different here, lighter somehow, with a faint shimmer that made everything look like it was underwater. Behind him, his team of diplomats adjusted their formal uniforms one last time. This was it. Humanity's first real chance to make friends with an alien species. The Vela delegation waited for them in what could only be described as a living building. The walls pulsed gently with soft blue light, and the ceiling seemed to breathe. June had read the briefings, but seeing the Vela in person still caught him off guard. They were tiny. The tallest adult barely reached his waist. Their skin had a pearl-like quality that shifted colors as they moved, and their large eyes took up nearly half their faces. Elder Kiva, the head of their council, greeted June with a formal bow. "Welcome, Captain of the Skywalkers," she said in surprisingly clear English. "We have learned your tongue to honor this meeting." The negotiations began smoothly enough. The Vela wanted to establish trade routes through human space, offering their crystal technology in exchange for safe passage to distant worlds. June found himself impressed by their straightforward approach. No hidden agendas, no political games, just honest business. That's when he noticed her. A small figure peeked around one of the council members' chairs. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with the same pearl skin as the adults but brighter, more curious eyes. While the grown-ups talked about shipping lanes and resource exchanges, she watched June with the kind of intense focus only children possess. During a break in the formal discussions, the little girl approached him. She moved with careful, deliberate steps, her tiny hands clasped behind her back. "Excuse me, Skywalker," she said in a voice like wind chimes. "Why are you so big?" Several adult Vela turned toward them, but none seemed alarmed. If anything, they looked amused. June knelt down to bring himself closer to her eye level, though he still towered over her. "Well, that's just how humans grow. We get pretty tall compared to your people." "Will I ever be big like you?" she asked, tilting her head to one side. June chuckled. The question was so innocent, so purely childlike, that it reminded him of his own niece back on Earth. "Maybe when you grow up, little one. Who knows? Maybe you'll even marry a human someday. And travel the stars with us." The child's eyes went wide with wonder. "Really, I could see the star roads." "Sure," June said, ruffling what he assumed was hair but felt more like silk. "When you're all grown up." The little girl, he later learned her name was Nari, beamed at him with a smile that could have powered a small city. She ran back to the adults, chattering excitedly in her own language. Elder Kiva approached June as the session resumed. Her expression had changed somehow, becoming more serious. "Captain June," she said quietly, "among our people, words spoken to children carry great weight. We believe the young ones hear truth more clearly than adults." June waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, that was just kid talk. You know how children are. Always asking what-if questions." "Perhaps," Elder Kiva replied, but her tone suggested she didn't quite agree. "However, you should know that our species possesses perfect memory. We forget nothing, especially promises made to our young ones." June felt a small flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. These aliens seemed friendly enough, but they clearly had some strange customs. Perfect memory, sacred promises to children. It sounded like superstition dressed up as culture. The negotiations concluded successfully 2 days later. Humanity had its first alien trade partner, and the Vela had their passage rights. As June prepared to leave, little Nari appeared one last time. "I won't forget," she told him solemnly. "When I'm big, I'll come find you." June smiled and patted her head again. "Sure thing, kiddo, you do that." As his ship lifted off from the crystal world, June was already thinking about his next assignment. The Vela seemed like good people, and that little girl was adorable. He made a mental note to send her some Earth toys when the first trade ships arrived. He had no idea that across the galaxy, a 7-year-old girl was beginning the most important education of her life. Admiral June sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Terra's Pride, reviewing monthly fleet reports when the alarm started screaming. Red lights bathed the bridge as his communications officer, Lieutenant Park, turned toward him with wide eyes. "Sir, we've got contacts, lots of them." The main screen flickered to life, showing dozens of crystalline ships materializing at the edge of Earth's solar system. They weren't like anything in the human fleet database. These vessels looked grown rather than built, their surfaces pulsing with the same soft light June remembered from years ago. "Vela ships," he muttered, though something felt wrong. The last he'd heard, the Vela were peaceful traders, running small cargo vessels through the outer colonies. This looked like a full battle fleet. "Sir, they're not responding to standard hails," reported communications. "Wait, we're getting something now. It's formal. Very formal." A new voice came through the speakers, speaking perfect English, with that familiar wind chime quality. "To Admiral June of the human fleet. The Vela Armada requests immediate audience. We come bearing the ancient banners of binding promise. You will know why we have come." June's blood ran cold. Ancient banners. Binding promise? He'd been in the military long enough to know that when aliens showed up with formal language and overwhelming force, it usually meant trouble. "How many ships are we looking at?" he asked his tactical officer. 237 confirmed. "Contacts, sir, and they're big. Each one outguns our heaviest cruisers." The bridge fell silent. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of maybe 50 ships, and most of those were patrol craft. If these Vela wanted a fight, humanity was in serious trouble. "Sir, the lead ship is requesting permission to dock. They're sending over ceremonial credentials." June rubbed his temples. 12 years of military service, countless battles with pirates and hostile species, and now this. Fine. Clear Bay 7 for diplomatic reception. Full honor guard, but keep the weapons ready. An hour later, June stood in the docking bay wearing his dress uniform, trying to remember everything he could about Vela customs. The ceremonial banners they'd mentioned were already displayed, intricate crystal formations that hummed with internal light. He'd never seen anything like them. The Vela shuttle docked with barely a whisper. When the airlock opened, a figure emerged that made June's heart skip a beat. She was still small by human standards, maybe 4.5 feet tall, but she carried herself with unmistakable authority. Her pearl-like skin had deepened to a rich silver, and her large eyes held a confidence that hadn't been there before. But he knew that face. Even after 12 years, he knew it. "Hello, Admiral June," she said, her voice no longer that of a child, but carrying the same musical quality. "I am Fleet Commander Nari of the Vela Defense Corps. I believe you remember me." The memory hit him like a physical blow. A little girl, asking why humans were so big. His casual joke about marriage and traveling the stars. The elders' warning about promises to children. "Nari," he whispered. She smiled, but it wasn't the innocent smile of childhood. This was the smile of someone who held all the cards in a very serious game. "You promised me," she said simply. "When I grew up, you said I could marry a human and see the stars. Well, Admiral, I have grown up. I've trained for 12 years, learned your customs, mastered your language, and earned command of our greatest fleet. I have come to collect on your promise." Behind her, a dozen Vela officers filed into the bay. Each wore armor that seemed to be made of living crystal, and each carried weapons that definitely weren't ceremonial. "Now wait just a minute," June started, but Nari held up a small hand. "You gave your word to a child, Admiral, in the presence of witnesses. Do you remember what Elder Kiva told you about our people's memory?" The conversation from 12 years ago came flooding back. Perfect memory, sacred promises, words that carried weight. That was just, I was being friendly, it was a joke. Nari's expression didn't change. "We do not joke about promises made to children, Admiral June. Your words were recorded in our memory crystals. They were witnessed by my clan elders. According to the laws of both our peoples, a contract was made." "Both our peoples?" June's voice cracked slightly. "Oh yes," Nari said, producing a data pad that glowed with soft light. "I have spent considerable time studying human law as well. Verbal contracts, witnessed and recorded, are binding in your culture too, especially when made by a representative of your government to a foreign dignitary." The docking bay suddenly felt very small, and the Vela officers seemed much more intimidating than before. So, Admiral, Nari continued, shall we discuss the terms of our arrangement? I believe you humans have a saying about promises made coming home to roost. Admiral June stared at the glowing crystal in Nari's hands, his mouth suddenly dry. The device was no bigger than his thumb, but it pulsed with an inner light that made his eyes water if he looked directly at it. This is a memory crystal, Nari explained, her voice calm and professional. Every important moment in Vela society is recorded in these. They cannot lie, cannot be altered, and they preserve every detail exactly as it happened. She placed the crystal on a small pedestal that one of her officers had set up. The air above it shimmered, and suddenly June was looking at himself from 12 years ago. The hologram was so clear he could see the wrinkles in his old uniform, hear his own laughter echoing in the docking bay. Maybe when you grow up, little one, his younger self said, kneeling beside a tiny Vela child, maybe you'll even marry a human someday and travel the stars with us. The holographic child's eyes went wide with wonder. Really? I could see the star roads? Sure. When you're all grown up. The image faded, leaving an uncomfortable silence. June felt heat creeping up his neck. Hearing his own words played back like that made them sound so much more serious than he remembered. That's not exactly how I remember it, he said weakly. Memory crystals do not forget, Admiral. They do not change details to make us feel better about our past actions. Nari's tone remained polite, but there was steel underneath it. This recording was witnessed by Elder Kiva, Sub-Elder Rin, and 17 other members of my clan. In our culture, when an adult makes a promise to a child in front of witnesses, it becomes sacred law. June's security chief, Commander Kim, stepped forward. With respect, Fleet Commander, surely you understand that humans sometimes speak casually. We don't always mean every word literally. Nari turned those large, pearl-colored eyes toward Kim. Your species is known for this, yes. We have studied human behavior extensively. However, this was not casual speech. Admiral June was representing your government during formal diplomatic contact. He spoke directly to a child of our royal bloodline in the presence of our clan elders. Under both our laws and yours, this constitutes a binding agreement. Royal bloodline? June's voice came out as a squeak. Did you think they would send just anyone to negotiate with alien species? Nari asked, with what might have been amusement. I am the daughter of the Vela High Council's first speaker. My clan has ruled our world for 3,000 years, the Gia. Docking Bay suddenly felt much colder. June realized he wasn't just dealing with an individual's hurt feelings. This was a matter of interstellar politics. Look, he said, trying to find steady ground. I understand this is important to your people, but surely you can see that I was just being kind to a child. It was a joke. Adults tell children impossible things all the time to make them happy. The silence that followed was deafening. Every Vela officer in the bay had gone perfectly still, their pearl skin shifting to darker shades. Nari's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made June take a step backward. Admiral June, she said slowly, in 12 years of studying human culture, I have learned many things. I know about your movies, your music, your literature. I understand your concepts of humor, sarcasm, and even your cruel practice of lying to spare feelings. But there is one thing I cannot comprehend. No matter how hard I try, she stepped closer, and despite her small size, June felt like he was being loomed over by something much larger and more dangerous. How can any civilized species tell lies to their children? How can adults look into the trusting eyes of the young and speak words they do not mean? In our culture, children are sacred because they believe completely. To betray that trust, she shook her head. It is the greatest crime imaginable. But I didn't mean to. You spoke words of promise to a 7-year-old child, Nari interrupted. That child spent the next 12 years preparing to honor those words. I learned your language until I spoke it better than most humans. I studied your military tactics, your art, your philosophy. I rose through our fleet ranks faster than anyone in Vela history, all to prove myself worthy of the human who promised to take me to the stars. She gestured to her officers. My entire clan has prepared for this day. We built this fleet, trained these soldiers, traveled across the galaxy because we believed in your word. Are you telling me it was all meaningless? June looked around the bay at the crystal-armored warriors, at the impossible ships waiting outside, at the technology that could probably turn Earth into cosmic dust. All of this because he'd tried to be nice to a kid. I need time to think about this, he said. Nari nodded. Of course. This is not a decision to make lightly. But Admiral, understand this. My people have come too far and sacrificed too much to simply accept that human promises mean nothing. One way or another, your words will be honored. The threat wasn't spoken, but it hung in the air like smoke. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been going for 3 hours, and Admiral June could feel every single minute weighing on his shoulders. The holographic faces of Earth's most powerful leaders floated around the oval table, each one looking more worried than the last. "Let me get this straight," said Secretary Chen, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "You made a casual comment to an alien child 12 years ago, and now they've brought their entire military to collect on it?" "It wasn't meant to. Be taken seriously," June protested for what felt like the 100th time. "I was just being friendly." "Well, they're taking it seriously now," growled General Park from his seat at Earth Defense Command. "My analysts say those ships out there could glass every major city on the planet without breaking a sweat. Their energy signatures are off the charts." President Lee leaned forward, her expression grim. "Admiral, help me understand something. You're telling me that this fleet commander Nari genuinely believes you're going to marry her. This isn't some kind of elaborate invasion plan." Before June could answer, his communication device chimed. Fleet Commander Nari's face appeared in miniature above the table, her pearl skin shifting with what looked like concern. "Admiral June, I apologize for interrupting your council meeting, but I felt it important to address any misunderstandings directly." The room went dead silent. Secretary Chen found her voice first. "Fleet Commander, this is a closed session of the Earth government. Your planet's communication networks are quite easy to access," Nari replied matter-of-factly. "We have been monitoring all frequencies to ensure our intentions are understood correctly. May I speak?" President Lee shot a look at June, who nodded reluctantly. "Go ahead, Fleet Commander." "Thank you. I understand you believe this to be about conquest or political manipulation." "It is not. This is about the fundamental structure of Vela society. We are bound by our promises, especially those made to children. If we allow sacred words to become meaningless, our entire civilization would collapse within a generation." "General." Park leaned forward aggressively. "Are you threatening us, alien?" "I'm explaining our position, General. Your species makes promises lightly and breaks them easily. Ours cannot survive such casual dishonesty." Admiral June's words were not just heard by a child. They were witnessed by our clan leaders and recorded in sacred crystals. To ignore them would be to declare that no Vela promise has meaning. The hologram flickered as another figure entered the frame. This Vela was slightly taller than Nari, with skin that gleamed like polished chrome and eyes that seemed to hold starlight. "This is my second in command, Captain Hana," Nari said. "Perhaps a demonstration would help you understand the seriousness of our position." "Demonstration of what?" President Lee asked, though her tone suggested she didn't really want to know. The view shifted to show the space around Earth. Captain Hana's voice came through clearly. "Admiral June, your people have been testing our resolve by targeting our ships with sensor sweeps and weapon locks. We understand this is defensive posturing, but it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of our capabilities." On the screen, one of the crystalline Vela ships began to glow. The light started at its core and spread outward like water through glass, until the entire vessel pulsed with brilliant energy. "There is an asteroid in your outer system," Hana continued. "Your military has been using it for weapons testing. Your most powerful laser batteries require 17 minutes of sustained fire to crack its surface." The camera view zoomed out to show a massive space rock tumbling slowly through the void. June recognized it. Asteroid designation XK7, solid, iron and nickel, nearly 2 kilometers across. Earth's weapons designers had been hammering at it for months, using it to test new military technology. "Watch carefully," Hana said. The Vela ship's glow intensified, and then a beam of pure light lanced out across space. It wasn't like human laser weapons. There was no visible beam, no dramatic light show. Instead, the asteroid simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a mountain-sized chunk of metal and rock. The next moment, there was nothing but glittering dust expanding in a perfect sphere. The silence in the council chamber was deafening. "Your weapons could not scratch that asteroid's surface," Hannah observed calmly. "We removed it from existence in 1.3 seconds. This is not a threat, merely context for your discussions." General Park's face had gone pale. How many ships like that do you have?" 237 in this fleet alone," Nari answered. "Admiral June, we did not come here to conquer your world. We came to honor a promise. But please understand, my people have invested everything in this moment. Our honor, our resources, our future. We cannot simply return home empty-handed." President Lee found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "What exactly are you asking for?" "What was promised 12 years ago? A union between our peoples, sealed by the marriage of Admiral June and myself. This would create a permanent alliance between Earth and the Vela worlds, bringing you under our protection and granting you access to our technology." "And if we refuse?" Secretary Chen asked. The pause that followed felt like an eternity. "Then we would be forced to conclude that human promises are worthless," Nari said finally, "and worthless promises cannot form the basis of peaceful relations between our species." The implication hung in the air like a sword. Around the table, the faces of Earth's leaders reflected the same terrible understanding. They weren't just deciding Admiral June's fate, they were deciding the fate of humanity itself. The war room deep beneath Earth Defense Command had never felt smaller. Admiral June sat across from Colonel Tay, Earth's top military strategist, watching as holographic battle simulations played out in the air between them. Every scenario ended the same way, with human ships scattered like broken toys across the solar system. "It's not even close," Tay said, rubbing his tired eyes. "I've run every possible engagement scenario. Concentrated attacks, guerrilla tactics, even ramming actions. We might take out 2, maybe 3 of their ships before they wipe us out completely." "What?" "About the orbital defense platforms," June asked, though he already knew the answer. "Those crystal weapons they showed us, they could pop our defense stations like soap bubbles. Sir, I've been planning military operations for 20 years, and I've never seen such a mismatch in capabilities. It would be like cavemen trying to fight jet fighters." On the main screen, red dots marked the positions of Vela ships throughout Earth's solar system. What had started as a fleet at the outer edge was now spreading throughout human space. Not aggressively, they maintained respectful distances from all civilian traffic. But the message was clear. "They're not positioning for attack," Tay observed, studying the patterns. "Look at this, they're arranging themselves around our major population centers, but staying well outside defensive perimeters. It's almost like an honor guard," June finished. "They're showing respect while demonstrating strength." His communication panel chimed. Nari's face appeared, but something was different. She wasn't wearing her formal military uniform. Instead, she had on what looked like civilian clothes, a flowing robe that shifted colors like oil on water. "Admiral." "Joan, may I speak with you privately? Not as fleet commander to Admiral, but as 2 people trying to understand each other." Tay started to object, but June waved him off. "Clear the room, Colonel. Give us some space." When they were alone, Nari's formal composure seemed to crack slightly. She looked younger somehow, more like the curious child he'd met years ago. "This isn't how I wanted this to happen," she said quietly. "When I dreamed of this day as a child, I imagined, I don't know, something more romantic, I suppose, more like the human stories I read." "Stories?" June asked. "I studied everything about your culture, Admiral. Your movies, your books, your music. I know about your concept of love, of choosing your own partner. I know that forced marriages are considered barbaric in modern human society." She paused, her large eyes reflecting something that might have been pain. "Do you think I wanted to arrive with a fleet at my back, making demands like some ancient warlord?" June felt something twist in his chest. "Then why did you?" "Because I had no choice," she whispered. "You cannot understand what it means to be Vela. Every promise is sacred. Every word spoken to a child becomes part of their destiny. When you made that promise to me, it wasn't just heard by my ears. It was absorbed into my very soul. She stood and walked to what must have been a window on her ship. Behind her, Joan could see the curve of Earth hanging in space like a blue marble. I spent 12 years preparing for this moment, she continued. Learning your language until I dreamed. In English. Studying your military tactics until I could think like a human commander. Reading your philosophy, your poetry, your histories of great love stories. And somewhere in all that studying... What? June prompted gently. I fell in love with the idea of you. Not just the man who made me a promise, but the culture that created such complex, contradictory, wonderful beings. Humans who can be cruel and kind in the same breath, who create beautiful art about love while building terrible weapons of war, who lie to spare feelings and tell hard truths to help friends grow. On the screen, June could see her reflection, and he was surprised to see tears on her cheeks. He hadn't known the Vela could cry. But it doesn't matter what I feel, she said, turning back to face him. My personal desires are irrelevant. I am the daughter of the first speaker, and I carry the honor of my entire people. If I return home without fulfilling this promise, it will destroy everything we believe in. Before June could respond, Colonel Tay's voice crackled over the intercom. Sir, you need to see this. The Vela fleet is moving. The tactical display lit up as crystalline ships began shifting positions. They weren't attacking. Instead, they were forming perfect geometric patterns around Earth's major cities. London, Tokyo, New York, Mumbai. Each metropolis now had a formation of alien ships hanging in the sky above it like glittering jewelry. What are they doing? June asked. Nari's expression had returned to its formal mask. We are taking position for the ceremony of witnessed promise. In Vela tradition, when a sacred vow must be fulfilled, the entire community gathers to observe. Your people in those cities below, they are now witnesses to this moment. You're involving civilians? We are including them, she corrected. If you accept the promise, they will celebrate with us. If you refuse. She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. June stared at the display, watching as millions of humans across the globe looked up at alien ships hanging in their skies. Some were probably panicking, others might be taking pictures, but all of them were now part of something much larger than a personal promise between two individuals. I need time, he said. Time is what we no longer have, Nari replied. My fleet commanders are growing restless. Captain Hana believes your hesitation shows disrespect to our entire species. Admiral, you must choose, honor the promise and unite our peoples, or face the consequences of broken faith. The transmission ended, leaving June alone with the weight of two civilizations resting on his shoulders. Outside, alien ships waited in perfect formation, while below them, 8 billion humans held their breath. Admiral June stood in his quarters aboard the Terror's Pride, staring out at the crystal ships that filled Earth's sky like floating cities. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, and his coffee had gone cold hours ago, but his mind was finally clear. There had to be another way, some solution that didn't involve either surrendering to what felt like blackmail or watching humanity get wiped out by superior technology. The door chimed, and Colonel Tay entered without waiting for permission. Sir, the President is asking for your final decision. The media is going crazy down there. Half the world thinks we're being invaded. The other half thinks it's some kind of elaborate first contact ceremony. What do you think, Tay? June asked, still looking out at the alien fleet. Honestly, I think that young woman out there is as trapped as you are. Did you see her face during that last transmission? She doesn't want to be the bad guy any more than you want to be forced into marriage. June nodded slowly. That was exactly what he'd been thinking. Get me a direct line to Fleet Commander Nari. Full diplomatic protocols, but make sure her advisors know this is a formal proposal, not just another discussion. 20 minutes later, Nari appeared on his main screen, flanked by two other Vela officers. One was Captain Hana, whose chrome-like skin seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. The other was someone new, older, with skin that had deepened to a rich bronze color and eyes that held the weight of years. Admiral June, Nari said formally. Have you reached a decision regarding the sacred promise? I have a counter-proposal, June said, standing at attention, one that I believe honors both our cultures while addressing the concerns of both our peoples. The bronze-skinned Veiler stepped forward. I am Elder Bin, advisor to Fleet Commander Nari and keeper of clan law. By what authority do you propose to alter a sacred promise? By the authority of someone who wants to do the right thing, June replied simply. Fleet Commander, you've spent 12 years learning about humans. You know our customs, our laws, our ways of thinking, but there's something you might not understand about how we approach marriage and partnership. Nari's expression softened slightly. What do you mean? We have something called courtship. A time when two people get to know each other as they really are, not as idealized versions of themselves. You've studied the Admiral June who exists in military records and public files, but you don't know the man who burns breakfast, who stays up too late reading old books, who sometimes makes terrible jokes at inappropriate moments. Captain Hana made a sound that might have been scoffing. You seek to delay the inevitable. No, June said firmly. I seek to make it real. Fleet Commander Nari, I can see in your eyes that you want this choice to be genuine. Not just duty, not just obligation, but a real decision made by two people who understand what they're choosing. Nari was quiet for a long moment, her large eyes studying his face through the transmission. What exactly are you proposing? 1 year, June said. I will come to your homeworld and live among your people. I'll learn your customs, your language, your way of thinking. And you'll get to know the real me, not the perfect human hero you've imagined, but the flawed, complicated person I actually am. Elder Bin stepped forward aggressively. This is unacceptable. The sacred promise has waited 12 years already. Our people demand fulfillment. But Nari held up a small hand and her advisor fell silent. Continue, Admiral. At the end of that year, we both make a choice. A real choice, based on genuine knowledge of each other. If we decide to proceed with the marriage, it will be because two people chose each other, not because ancient promises forced us together. And if we decide we're not compatible, he took a deep breath, then we find another way to honor the spirit of the original promise while respecting both our peoples. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Captain Hana was clearly unhappy, her skin shifting to darker, more agitated colors. Elder Bin looked like he was about to explode with indignation. But Nari looked hopeful. You would leave Earth, she asked quietly. Leave your command, your people, your life, to come and live among strangers whose ways you don't understand. If it means finding a real solution, instead of just forcing compliance, yes. And you believe 1 year would be sufficient? June smiled for the first time in days. Fleet Commander, I've seen what you accomplished in 12 years of studying humans from a distance. I think two people living side by side, honestly trying to understand each other, can learn a lot in 12 months. Elder Bin stepped forward again. Fleet Commander, this deviation from protocol is what? Nari interrupted, turning to face her advisor. Wise? Respectful of both our peoples? Likely to lead to a stronger alliance built on genuine understanding. Rather than forced compliance, it is not what was promised, Bin said stubbornly. What was promised, Nari said, her voice growing stronger, was marriage and partnership. Admiral June is not refusing that promise. He is asking to fulfill it properly, in a way that honors both our cultures. She turned back to the screen, and June could see something new in her expression. Not the formal mask of a fleet commander, or the desperate hope of a young woman trying to fulfill an impossible obligation, but the curiosity of someone genuinely interested in discovering something new. I accept your proposal, Admiral June, she said formally. 1 year on the Veiler homeworld, 1 year to know each other as we truly are, and at the end of that time, a choice made freely by both parties. Elder Bin looked scandalized, but Captain Hana tilted her head thoughtfully. It is an interesting approach, she admitted grudgingly. Then it's settled, June said. When do we begin? For the first time since this whole crisis began, Nari smiled, not the formal expression of a diplomat, but the genuine smile of someone who had just been offered exactly what she'd secretly hoped for all along. How does tomorrow sound? The crystal spire that served as June's new home rose 300 feet into the pale blue sky of the Vela homeworld, its walls humming with a gentle energy that had taken him weeks to get used to. 6 months into his year-long stay, Admiral June no longer jumped every time the building sang to itself, though he still found the living architecture fascinating in ways that defied human understanding. "You're holding it wrong again," Nari said from across the practice chamber, her voice patient but tinged with amusement. "Crystal technology responds to intention, not force. Stop trying to dominate it and start trying to collaborate with it." June looked down at the crystal device in his hands, something that looked like a cross between a computer tablet and a piece of jewelry. For the past month, Nari had been teaching him the basics of Vela technology, and he was proving to be a terrible student. "This goes against everything I know about machines," he muttered, loosening his grip on the crystal. "Humans build tools that do what we tell them to do. This thing seems to have opinions." "Because it does," said a new voice from the doorway. Elder Ray entered the chamber, moving with the careful grace of someone who had lived for centuries. Unlike the younger Vela, her skin had deepened to a rich golden color, and her eyes held depths that reminded June of ancient forests. She had become his unofficial guide to Vela culture, and possibly the wisest person he'd ever met. "Elder Ray," June said, offering the respectful bow he'd finally learned to perform correctly. "I was just failing to understand crystal resonance." "Again?" "Were you?" Ray asked, settling onto a floating cushion that materialized as she approached. "Or were you succeeding at understanding the difference between your people and ours?" The crystal in June's hands suddenly flared to life, displaying a complex holographic interface that responded to his thoughts rather than his touch. He nearly dropped it in surprise. "There," Nari said, clapping her hands together. "You see, the moment you stopped fighting it and started working with it, it responded perfectly." June stared at the device, then at Nari. Over the past 6 months, he'd watched her in countless situations: formal council meetings, casual conversations with friends, intense strategy sessions with military advisors. What struck him most was how she approached every problem the same way, not by imposing her will but by finding the natural harmony in any situation. "Is this how you approached learning about humans?" he asked. "By trying to find harmony instead of imposing your understanding?" Nari's expression grew thoughtful. "At first, no. I tried to study your people the way we study crystal formations, by analyzing patterns and applying Vela logic. It didn't work. Your species is too chaotic." "Chaotic?" June raised an eyebrow. "Not in a bad way," she said quickly. "But humans don't follow predictable patterns the way Vela do. You make decisions based on emotion, intuition, sudden inspiration. You change your minds, contradict yourselves, act irrationally, and somehow make it work." Elder Ray chuckled. "Show him the wall, child." Nari looked embarrassed, but led June to what he'd thought was a decorative crystal formation on the far side of the chamber. As they approached, it lit up with hundreds of images, battle formations, strategic analyses, historical accounts of human military conflicts. "I've been studying your military tactics for 8 years, Nari admitted. "Not just the official doctrines, but the moments when human commanders threw out the rulebook and did something completely unexpected. The Battle of Midway, where Admiral Nimitz gambled everything on a single intelligence report. General Patton's dash across Europe, changing plans every day based on opportunity. Commander Singh's defense of the Mars colonies, where she used civilian mining equipment as weapons." June studied the displays, recognizing patterns he'd never noticed before. "You've been analyzing our unpredictability and failing to understand it," Nari said with a rueful smile, "until I realized that unpredictability isn't a flaw in human thinking, it's a strength. You adapt to changing situations faster than any species we've encountered. Where Vela society would spend months reaching consensus on a new approach, humans can change direction in minutes. But sometimes we change direction for stupid reasons," June pointed out. "Sometimes," Elder Ray agreed, "but more often than not, those quick decisions are based on intuitive understanding that your conscious minds haven't caught up to yet. It's remarkable." They spent the next hour going through specific examples, with Nari explaining how she'd tried to predict human behavior using Vela logic, and consistently failed until she learned to expect the unexpected. In return, Yun found himself describing the careful, methodical approach he'd observed in Vela society. How every decision was made with consideration for long-term consequences. How promises were kept not out of rigid obligation, but because they formed the foundation of trust that held their civilization together. Your people think in centuries, he observed. Mine barely think past next year. And yet you've expanded across half the galaxy in less than 200 years, Nari countered, while we've remained on our homeworld for millennia, perfecting our understanding of crystal harmonics. Maybe that's why this arrangement might actually work, Elder Ray said quietly. Your species complements each other, human adaptability and Vela stability, human innovation and Vela precision. As if to demonstrate her point, the crystal device in June's hands began displaying a new interface, one that seemed to blend human, intuitive design with Vela harmonic principles. Without thinking, he began manipulating the display, finding that his human instincts somehow worked in harmony with the crystal's alien logic. Look at that, Nari said softly, moving closer to watch over his shoulder. You're creating something neither of our peoples could have made alone. June became aware that she was standing very close to him, close enough that he could see the subtle shifts in her pearl-like skin that seemed to reflect her emotions. For the first time since arriving on the Vela world, he found himself thinking of her not as an obligation or a diplomatic problem, but as simply Nari, brilliant, dedicated, and genuinely interesting in ways he was only beginning to understand. 6 more months, he said quietly. 6 more months, she agreed, but she didn't step away. Elder Ray smiled and quietly left them to their work, the crystal chamber filling with soft harmonic tones as two very different minds learned to work in perfect harmony. The ceremonial chamber, deep within the crystal palace, felt different today. Over the past year, June had spent countless hours in this space, learning Vela customs and debating philosophy with Elder Ray. But now, with the pale morning light filtering through the living walls, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Today was decision day. Nari sat across from him on a cushion that glowed softly with her body's warmth, her pearl-like skin reflecting the nervous energy they both felt. She looked different than she had a year ago, more relaxed somehow, as if the weight of carrying an entire civilization's expectations had finally lifted from her shoulders. Nervous? She asked, and June was surprised to hear his own feelings echoed in her voice. Terrified, he admitted with a laugh. A year ago, I thought this was about duty and politics. Now it feels real. Elder Ray entered the chamber, carrying 2 crystal cups filled with what looked like liquid starlight. The ceremony will begin soon, she said, settling between them with the grace of someone who had officiated at countless important moments. But first, you both need to speak honestly about what you've learned. June accepted his cup, feeling the warm crystal pulse against his palms. The liquid inside swirled with colors that had no names in any human language. I'll start, he said, looking directly at Nari. A year ago, I thought I understood what my words meant to you. I was wrong. He paused, remembering the moment 6 months earlier when he'd finally grasped the true weight of promises in Vela culture. It had been during a clan gathering, watching Nari's 5-year-old cousin receive a vow from her grandmother. The absolute trust in the child's eyes, the solemn responsibility in the elder's voice. It had hit him like a physical blow. In human culture, we tell children that dreams can come true, but we don't always mean it literally. We say encouraging things to make them feel better about a disappointing world. But you... He shook his head. When I promised that 7-year-old girl she could marry a human and see the stars, I didn't realize I was reshaping her entire future. Not just making a casual comment, but giving her a destiny to live up to. Nari's skin shifted to deeper shades. What he'd learned was her equivalent of blushing. And I spent 12 years building you into someone perfect in my mind, the brave human admiral who would sweep me away to adventure among the stars. I had every detail planned out, from our first dance to the children we would have. What changed? Elder Ray asked gently. He burns toast, Nari said with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. The great Admiral June, terror of space pirates and master of strategy, cannot make breakfast without setting off smoke alarms. He stays up too late reading old Earth poetry, argues with the crystal interfaces when they don't work the way he expects, and makes terrible puns that somehow still make me laugh. June felt heat creeping up his neck. She's not exactly the perfect alien princess I was expecting either. She's stubborn, obsessive about military history, and she can drink me under the table with that fermented crystal wine you people make. And? Elder Ray prompted. And I think I love her, June said quietly. Not the idealized version, not the diplomatic solution to an impossible problem, but the real person sitting across from me. The woman who spent 3 weeks teaching me to harmonize with crystal technology, who listens to my terrible stories about Earth, who argues with me about battle tactics until we're both laughing too hard to remember what we were debating. Nari set down her cup with hands that trembled slightly. I love him too. Not Admiral June the hero, but the man who tries to pet every small animal we encounter, who learned to speak our language just so he could understand our poetry, who stays up late helping me solve strategic puzzles, even when he's exhausted from council meetings. So what's the problem? Elder Ray asked with a knowing smile. You love each other. The year has ended. The choice seems clear. The problem, June said slowly, is that I want to make sure we're choosing each other, not just accepting the inevitable. Nari, if there were no promises, no clan obligations, no interstellar politics, if you were just a person I'd met in any random circumstance, would you still want to marry me? The question hung in the air like incense. Outside, June could hear the distant sounds of the Vela city, preparing for what might be either a celebration or a diplomatic crisis, depending on their answer. Nari was quiet for a long time, her large eyes studying his face as if memorizing every detail. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Not because you promised a 7-year-old girl she could see the stars, not because our peoples need an alliance, not because 12 years of my life would be wasted if I said no, but because you're kind to people who can't help you, because you try to understand things that seem impossible, because you make me laugh even when I'm supposed to be serious. Even though I'm not the perfect hero you imagined, especially because you're not perfect, she said with a smile that made the crystal walls around them hum in harmony. Perfect heroes exist only in stories. Real people are complicated and flawed and wonderful in ways that stories can't capture. I don't want to marry a legend, June. I want to marry you. Elder Ray stood slowly, her ancient eyes bright with satisfaction. Then let's go tell 2 civilizations that sometimes the most important promises are the ones we choose to keep, not the ones we're forced to honor. As they walked toward the great hall where representatives from both worlds waited, June felt something he'd never experienced before, the absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged, with exactly the right person, making exactly the right choice. Behind them, the ceremonial chamber filled with soft harmonic tones that sounded remarkably like laughter. 5 years after the wedding that nearly started an interstellar war, Admiral June stood on the bridge of the Harmonies, Edge, the first ship ever built using both human and Vela technology. The vessel itself was a marvel, human engineering married to Vela crystal harmonics, creating something that neither species could have imagined alone. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. It's the Razor's Wind, Captain Hana's flagship. June smiled. Captain Hana had become one of their most trusted allies, though she still occasionally grumbled about the irregular nature of their marriage arrangement. Today, she was leading a joint patrol of the Outer Rim, where human adaptability and Vela precision worked together to keep the trade routes safe. Put her through, June said. Hana's chrome-like face appeared on the main screen, her expression as serious as ever. Admiral, we've encountered a situation that requires both our people's expertise. Unknown ships have been raiding civilian transports. Near the Kepler station, they're using tactics we haven't seen before. Human or Vela casualties? Both. The raiders seem to know exactly how to counter our individual strengths, but they haven't faced our combined forces yet. June nodded. This was exactly the kind of challenge that had made the Human-Vela alliance the most formidable force in known space. Separately, both species had their limitations. Humans were innovative but sometimes reckless. Vela were precise but could be slow to adapt. Together, they covered each other's weaknesses while amplifying each other's strengths. "We'll rendezvous with you in 6 hours," June said. "And Hana, make sure the civilians know help is coming." As the transmission ended, Nari entered the bridge carrying their 2-year-old daughter, little Sina, who had inherited her mother's pearl-like skin, but her father's curious brown eyes. The child babbled happily in a mixture of English and Vela, switching between languages with the casual ease of someone who had never known that communication could be difficult. "How's our little diplomat?" June asked, accepting Sina into his arms. "She just convinced the entire crystal garden to bloom early by asking nicely," Nari said with a laugh. "I think she's going to be even more trouble than her parents." The comment drew chuckles from the bridge crew, a mix of human and Vela officers who worked together with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible a decade ago. The integration hadn't been without challenges, but Elder Ray had been right. The two species complemented each other in ways that created something greater than the sum of their parts. "Sir," called Communications Officer Kim, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. It's marked for the Diplomatic Corps." "Let me guess," Nari said with a knowing look. Another first contact situation where someone said something, "They shouldn't have to an alien child." June winced. Over the past 5 years, his story had become required reading at the Diplomatic Academy. The June incident, as it was officially known, was used to teach new diplomats about the critical importance of understanding cultural contexts before making any promises, especially to children. The message that came through was from Ambassador Lee, one of the Academy's top instructors. "Admiral, we have a situation on Proxima 7. A junior diplomat promised a young crystalline child that humans would help terraform their moon, not realizing that crystalline children are considered adults at age 4, and that the promise was legally binding under their planetary constitution. We need a cultural mediator who understands the complexity of interspecies promises." Nari raised an eyebrow. "Sounds familiar. At least this time it's someone else's problem," June said, though he was already calculating how long it would take to reach Proxima 7. "Is it someone else's problem?" Nari asked pointedly. "We're the reason the Alliance exists. We're the proof that accidental promises can lead to meaningful partnerships. Don't you think we have a responsibility to help?" She was right, of course. The Human-Vela Alliance had become more than just a military and economic partnership. It had become a model for how different species could work together, combining their unique strengths to face challenges that neither could handle alone. Their success had inspired similar alliances throughout the galaxy, creating a network of cooperation that was reshaping interstellar politics. "Set course for Proxima 7, June ordered, "and someone get me everything we know about crystalline child-rearing practices." As the Harmony's Edge adjusted course, June looked out at the stars and reflected on how one careless comment to a curious child had changed the course of galactic history. The Vela fleet that had once seemed like an invasion force now served as the backbone of interstellar peacekeeping. Human innovation had been enhanced by Vela wisdom, while Vela tradition had been enriched by human creativity. Little Sena babbled something in her hybrid language and pointed at the stars, as if she could see the infinite possibilities waiting. "Out there, what do you think she's saying?" Nari asked. June bounced his daughter gently, watching her eyes light up as she gazed into space. "Probably making promises to the universe that we'll have to help her keep someday." "Good," Nari said, taking his free hand. "The best promises are the ones worth keeping." Behind them, the bridge hummed with the quiet efficiency of two peoples working as one, while ahead of them, another crisis waited to be solved through the kind of understanding that could only come from taking promises seriously, especially the ones made to children who still believed that anything was possible. In the end, Admiral June's greatest mistake had become his greatest gift to the galaxy. The knowledge that words have power, promises have weight, and sometimes the most important bonds are forged not by careful planning, but by the courage to honor commitments. That seemed impossible at the time. The alliance born from one human's careless kindness to an alien child had proven that the universe was vast enough for every promise to find its fulfillment, if people were willing to work together to make it happen.